It's Thursday morning, the 30th of January. We now have a lot more information about the tragic mid-air collision between the military helicopter and the American Airlines regional jet while on final approach to runway 33 at Washington's Ronald Reagan International Airport. My name is Juan Brown. You're watching the BLANCOLIRIO channel. Let's check it out. We now know that the Black Hawk helicopter was on a published helicopter route, presumably heading down to Davison Army Airfield located to the south of DCA. If you go to SkyVector Aeronautical Charts and, let me move this out of the way, click on the DC helicopter chart button, you'll get this chart that shows these published routes through the Class Bravo airspace. This helicopter was operating on Route 1 coming down the Potomac River from the north and then transitioning to Route 4 and continuing the route to the south towards Davison Army Airfield. If we look closely at Route 1, the maximum altitude, located right here, is 200 feet, and this route is to hug the eastern shoreline of the Potomac River. This route needs to be flown at or below 200 feet to stay below the arrivals into DCA. Not until you get below or south of the Wilson Bridge are you then allowed to climb to 300 feet, maximum altitude. These are visual routes flown in visual or VFR conditions. This is very tight hemmed-in airspace, as you've got the prohibited areas of the White House and the Pentagon located right up here, and you've got the airspace of DCA Airport located right here. There's 3 runways at Washington, DCA. Runway 1 is the main runway, 7,169 feet long, and that's the runway that this RJ was originally lined up to land on. But at the request of ATC, the RJ was asked to come around and land on runway 33, the shorter runway at just 5,200 feet. This is a very demanding approach and very busy airspace. Not only do you got to stay within the tight constraints of the airspace, but the runways are short, so you got to get it right on the end of the runway, requiring all of your attention. The approach that the RJ was initially cleared for was the visual approach to runway 1, which looks like this, which brings you straight up the river to land on runway 1. Now with the RJ coming in from the south and then circling around to land on runway 33, that puts the RJ pretty much beak to beak with the helicopter, with the RJ above the helicopter. The problem is, and this has been reported by other helicopter Black Hawk pilots that have flown this exact route and have seen this exact scenario, the problem is going beak to beak at night, the lights of the RJ tend to blend in with the city lights behind you, even though the RJ is a little bit above the helicopter. Another problem when you're going head to head with each other is if there's no lateral movement in the windscreen, that light is very hard to detect. Now, eventually, the RJ has to make the left-hand turn to land on runway 33, and that puts the helicopter onto the right side of the RJ. Now, very late into this transition, the tower controller here at the airport asks the helicopter, "Do you have the RJ jet in sight?" To which the helicopter responds, "Yes, we have the RJ in sight. Request visual separation." That hands off the responsibility of the separation of these two aircraft to that of the helicopter pilot. The ATC asks the helicopter pilot to then pass behind the RJ, to which the helicopter responds affirmative, but instead he runs right into the RJ. Complicating things may be the use of night vision goggles. Pete Hegseth mentioned in his press briefing that night vision goggles were being used on this training flight. It's believed that they were using the late model night vision goggles, these AN/AVS-9 white phosphor goggles. The problem with these NVGs is that they restrict your peripheral vision, and it's harder to visualize the depth perception in these NVGs. And usually if a helicopter crew's on NVGs, both pilots would be on NVGs at the same time in case they actually are in the real goo and one pilot's NVGs has a problem, the other one can continue to fly the aircraft safely. So let's take a listen to the actual ATC audio and see how this played out. Please support Victor at Vass Aviation on Patreon, as he takes a lot of time, effort, and energy to get this ATC communications down and overlaid on a proper radar animation.
Tower 5342 on Mount Vernon visual runway 1.
Blue Sheep 5342, Washington Tower 1 star 32 direct 17, Gulf 25. Can you take runway 33?
Yeah, we can do 33 for Blue Sheep 5342.
Blue Sheep 5342, that's a Wilson Bridge, change to turn for runway 33, clear to land.
Change to runway 33 for land, Blue Sheep 5342.
Okay, there's the initial call up from Blue Streak 5342. He's on the visual for runway 1, and then the tower asks him to transition to runway 33. So here's the regional jet just this far away from the runway, and here's Pat 25, the helicopter, working his way down Route 1 on the Potomac River. Now, one of the other holes in the Swiss cheese are the frequencies. The frequencies are split. The tower controller can listen to both the helicopter and the RJ. However, the helicopter is on a separate frequency from the RJ, so the RJ cannot hear the helicopter, and I don't believe the helicopter can hear the RJ. So the airline pilot is missing half of the conversation, thus reducing his situational awareness slightly. But if you can see from here, if he's going to circle around to runway 33, that's going to put him directly in conflict with Pat 25, where the controller is going to rely upon the altitude difference of just a couple hundred feet between these two aircraft to maintain separation. And the controller is also going to rely on the helicopter to maintain visual separation from the RJ. Now let's check out Victor's most recent video here, where he's done an excellent job of overlaying this over the helicopter route map. Here you can see the Route 1 that Pat 25 is flying. And here is the RJ, already offsetting to the right to make a left base entry to runway 33.
Yeah, 789, contact don't mark today.
Okay.
American 3130, slow to final.
Slow American 3130.
Pat 25, traffic just off the Wilson Bridge to CRJ at 1,200 feet, start from runway 33.
5 has a traffic site request visual separation.
This separation proof. American 1630 tower, runway 1, lot 4, traffic through outside from runway 33, dispatch 16 on final.
Runway 1.
This is in real time.
Blue Sheep 5307, keep rolling out to November, ground 47 today. American 1630 1 star 32 014, Gulf 25, traffic 2 mile left base runway 33, no delay, runway 1 clear for immediate takeoff.
Number 1, clear for takeoff, American 1630.
Pat 25, get the CRJ in sight. Pat 25, pass behind the CRJ.
Pat 25 has a aircraft in sight request visual separation.
Good separation.
American 4782 by Baton, Mount Vernon visual.
American 472, Washington Tower 1 star 32017.
As we look at these two targets merge, check out the altitude. Pat 25 at 200 feet as required on the route. It looks like he's slightly to the right of the route. Now he's up to 300 feet. He's 100 feet high. The CRJ descending to 500 feet, 400 feet, and then finally 400 feet. Pat 25 still at 300 feet. There the altitudes merge right at the collision. I also want to point out this. There's another aircraft behind the RJ that was involved in the collision, another American Airlines Jet 3130. Remember, the CRJ is owned by PSA Airlines, is a fully owned subsidiary of American Eagle, but has the call sign of Blue Streak. But this second aircraft behind the RJ may have been the aircraft that the helicopter mistakenly picked up on, or he could have been picking up one of the aircraft that were taking off. It's more likely than not that the crew of the helicopters picked up on the wrong target to see and avoid. So a lot of holes in the classic Swiss cheese model of accident investigations that the NTSB will be reviewing, including the runway change from runway 1 to runway 33, which put these two aircraft on a more tighter collision course. The altitude control of the helicopter on his training flight, getting above 200 feet, right directly into the way of the airliner. The possible use of night vision goggles, if that was a player, if that was a factor, that can certainly limit your situational awareness and your ability to see and avoid visually. The late call out by the air traffic control tower to the helicopter asking him if he sees the RJ in sight after the air traffic controller got the collision avoidance warning there in his cab. The fact that night visual approaches, trying to see and avoid, that the lights of the aircraft, especially if they're oncoming directly to you, tend to blend in with the lights of the city behind you. Flying C-130s up at the Reno National Guard for years, coming into Reno, it was very difficult to see your formation partner aircraft in front of you, as they would tend to blend into those city lights. The separate frequencies that the two different aircraft were operating on, giving you only half of the situational awareness that you would normally have if you could hear both sides of the conversation. And finally, the limits of TCAS, traffic collision avoidance systems, with the present technology where resolution advisories are disabled below 1,000 feet to avoid sending one aircraft into a descending RA into the ground, plus the limitation of no aural warnings from the TCAS below 500 feet. All these things are going to be looked at closely in this investigation. Thank you so much for your support of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible. See you here.